Yeah, wanted to kick off today with our two esteemed guests. Would be brilliant if you could both give sort of a quick introduction on yourselves. I think very few people in the room that have the experience and background that you both do in games. So, John, perhaps you could kick us off with what you've been up to across your career.
Sure. Hi there, I'm John Smedley. Been making games for 34 years now. It's been almost all that time making online games. Ran a company called Sony Online Entertainment for about 15 years, and currently doing a startup. I'm probably best known for games like EverQuest, PlanetSide, and H1Z1. And really honored to be here, especially with Hilmar, make one of my favorite games ever.
Thank you, John. I'm Hilmar. I'm from CCP. I've been making games slightly shorter than John. I think it's maybe, what is it now, 25 years or something like that. Started doing Metaverse with VRML in the 90s, and then mostly known for EVE Online, which is a game that has been going for 20 years. And we're just kind of announced kind of our third decade plans for EVE, but also most recently we have announced we're making a Web3 based game, which we have been in development on for kind of 2 to 3 years, but really is based on an idea that's been germinating since, I think, 2015.
Excellent. And so I kind of wanted to kick off, title of the panel is Overcoming Aversion to Crypto in Games. And kind of wanted to get your perspectives on sort of to what extent we should actually be like shying away from crypto being an integral part of games, right? We've been told to kind of abstract away the complexity a lot. But yeah, curious for your perspectives on this as a starting point, given you've both built games with big audiences in the traditional space historically. Hilmar, perhaps you could kick it off. I mean, EVE's a game with a ton of complexity. Curious what your view is on this.
Yeah, so I think having been through a few innovation cycles, then trying to convince people about something generally just doesn't work. It's a functional impossibility, really. People don't really change their mind at all through words and conviction. You really just have to play something that's awesome. And I mean, it's the same boring stuff every time. You just need to make a great game for the format you're using, be it mobile, be it PC, console, VR, Web3, pick your poison. It's only proven through a great game. I know we have, as a collective, struggled maybe with coming up with a great game. And it's mainly because it's hard to make a great game around the idea of an economy. I think, in a way, any Web3 experience will be some diet MMO. I think it's almost just fait accompli. MMOs are the only economy games we've made in the whatever, past 30 years. It's the only paradigm, really, that matches. Sure, it can be a shooter MMO, RTS MMO, MMORPG, it can be, but it's always going to be a MMO. And ultimately, we're trying to make an MMO with, where RMT is not a EULA violation. I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about. Somebody needs to make an MMO where RMT is not a EULA violation. Sure, there are more aspects to it than that, but in the minds of the world, it really is just going to be that. You need to dumb down your idea in a way that people can, okay. So while we wait for the great game to be made, we can yap all we like about like Aversion to Web3 and whatever. It's just, it's not really going to change anything. It just needs one great game to change the narrative, and nothing else will.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Obviously, as a game maker, the only thing I really care about is making great games. And when you're making a game, the major focus is obviously on making something fun that's going to delight other people. And in the kind of games we both make, that people can live in the worlds that we're creating. To me, the title of this is great because this concept of being aversion to insert X here. I mean, when we made EverQuest, we had a 3D card requirement. We were only the second game to do that. That was crazy. Subscription game, also crazy. It turns out if you build it, and you make something great, that's a great new experience, aversion quickly becomes curiosity, and people may not like something about it, but then they get their hands on it, they try it, and they're having a good time playing it. And if you look at this throughout the history of gaming, you've seen these new business models that have come on suddenly, and all of a sudden it goes from people hating that business model to being, oh, that's pretty cool. For example, free-to-play gaming. I definitely remember the transition from a subscription-based portfolio at Sony Online into one where we moved all our games to free-to-play. And I can tell you that the internal discussions and the aversion to going to free-to-play, oh, that's a bunch of garbageware that's coming. There's all these examples over the history of gaming where people were afraid of the new thing, and then suddenly a great game appeared, and those things go away. And then now it's like, of course, free-to-play is obvious. It wasn't obvious once upon a time. So to me, Web3 is just another great example of something that I think is going to become mainstream, but it only happens when there's a great game.
I'd love to understand, your perspectives on kind of where that disconnect has come from so far. So whilst Hilmar, you've said, and John, you've agreed that kind of need to build something that just demonstrates, like why this can be interesting. But I guess a part of your job still is, communicating that to your teams that help building these things. Obviously, there are some characteristics of this technology that are interesting to both of you. Perhaps you could talk us through like where the disconnect between, the mainstream view of it and like what's exciting to you and like why that difficulty in communicating those things exists.
So, I mean, the reason why we are doing this is that if I look at our 20 years of operating Game Online, there may be two key elements that we were there may be three, and I'll get to the third one. Web3 doesn't really solve it, but there were two key elements. One was the fact that on day one, people were treating ISK and EVE Online as if it were Icelandic fish money. The ISK and EVE Online is named after the currency system of Iceland, where Icelandic krona is the ISK symbol, and we were in a very punk rock mode of just becoming bigger than ISK, which we have achieved, by the way. EVE Online ISK is better for all intents and purposes than Icelandic fish money. But people were trading it, and trading it more than the Icelandic fish money, which are largely under currency controls and just used by Icelandic people, of which there are not many. And I mean, it was against the EULA. We have to do it. I mean, MMOs at this point in time, World of Warcraft comes out a year later and really achieves scales. A scale where like money laundering and all these things actually became a thing. Me and John were dealing with the fact that there was a lot of government scrutiny on MMOs kind of in 2004 and 5 of just, okay, I mean, we're now at a scale where it's serious. Then it kind of just faded away because, I don't know, we were getting a lot of sort of regulatory scrutiny. Anyway, we were ill-prepared for it. And we have for 20 years been fighting. The natural state is that people want to do this. And it's just a fact of life. We have ample data. It's rampant. It's for everyone. It's not just like whatever bot farms and sweatshops and whatnot. It's just universal. It just happens. And generally in a business, you don't want to be fighting your core customers. Like it's just a fact of life. Even if you don't like it, it just doesn't really matter. Life finds a way. So that's number one. Number two, there's massive amount of development that takes place around MMOs. All MMOs have like a vibrant ecosystem of third-party development. It's new user interfaces, it's all sorts of stat sites, it's news, it's like so many different things. And EVE probably has this to some very high standard because EVE is hideously complicated. It just needs a serious amount of tools to be able to achieve things in EVE. And shockingly, most of those tools are like HR systems, onboarding tools, cash flow management software for alliances in EVE Online. Like it's like a Fortune 500 sort of toolset list. So these two things, the fact that people just trade the currency of your game, regardless whether you like it or not. Thousands of people are making software for your game in a mostly janky-ass API gateway kind of a way. There must be a better way to build with these primitives. So if there's anything all this Web3 stuff has proven, it is good for decentralized development. It's just a fact. It really does work for decentralized development. And that has been proven. Is it good for creating a currency system with different primitives? Maybe. I don't think it's like really proven yet. It seems to work if the line is going up, but in between, not so much. But at least number one, it is good for decentralized development, period. It just is good. And that is primarily what we are focusing on. Secondarily, the fact that people would do this. And then there is a third thing about botting, which I'm going to park to give John some time to talk about this.
Sure. When I look at people's aversion to Web3 now, like I was saying previously, I think that same aversion exists to many aspects where real money and games intersect. There seems to be this like quote-unquote negative connotation to it, and yet it's everywhere in gaming. When we worked on a game called H1Z1, it was a battle royale game that we released back in late 2014 at Sony Online, and we didn't have Steam Marketplace hooked up right away. But we knew that we were going to do it, and we were in development on it. And when we released the ability for players to trade stuff on Steam Marketplace, oh my God, the hate we got. And then we saw the data, and the data was that roughly 30% of people were participating in that. So what people say in the light is very different than what they do in the dark very often. And to me, what Web3 gives is a very level playing field for this. A good example with Steam Marketplace that's interesting is you've all probably heard about the $800 knives in Counter-Strike, right? And people are like, why the hell would anybody pay $800 for a knife? Well, I paid $3,000 for a character on EVE Online, personally. Like this real money stuff is going on behind the scenes. And why do people have a problem with what other people are doing? Well, that tends to happen when there's some kind of gameplay impact. And that $800 knife, the only thing that $800 knife did was make you a target if you had it, which I think is great, right? You have the people that are proud to have the $800 knife, and you have the other people that are proud to kill those people with their free knife, right? And what I think Web3 does is it exposes the reality that's already going on out there. Now, as to why there's an aversion to it currently, well, I mean, there's some really simple reasons for that. I didn't even know what the hell the word fiat meant before starting to explore the Web3 space. There's all these steps to getting into buying things with cryptocurrency. And yet, the United States is probably the most mainstream government out there in supporting cryptocurrency. Don't believe me? Look at the 1040 tax form, which now actually has, I don't know, a lot of non-US people may not realize this, but one part of our government can get this shit straight. That's the IRS. The SEC may be a hot pile of garbage, but the IRS, that's a completely different story. That shit gets taxed just fine. So you are seeing a very mainstreaming of cryptocurrency, and yet there's story after story after story of these scams that are going on. When in reality, the actual use of NFTs has been out there for quite some time now, and you're just starting to see them get into games in a way that players can actually make real money legitimately. So I think to overcome the things that people dislike about it just requires great games that people are invested enough in to go, what is this stuff over here? If I get a $500, a gun that's worth $500, that's no more powerful than what my buddy gets on the same mission just through some random loot chance, I'm going to take notice if he sells that thing and makes money with it, because it's going to get me more interested. I think all it's going to take is some great games that are going to bring people to the point where they'll give it a try, and I think that'll be the tipping point. And I think we're starting to see that.
I'm curious, almost off the back of that exact example, one of the things, obviously, is like people, I feel like some of the aversion has stemmed from having to pay for a lot of this stuff up front. It feels like, here's the game companies, more value extraction. So some people have felt off-put by that, parking all the scams and stuff to the side. There's this whole notion of like free mints now, right, where a lot of the psychological aspects that we talk about of like digital ownership primitives, like increased affinity, for your items because you do own them. Do you guys see value in that, for example, as a way to like lure people into those sort of psychological levers, if you like, if you're not paying things up front?
I think always that you can just start without paying is, generally a very good value proposition. What is often forgotten about free-to-play is that like free-to-play is not a business model. Like it's a marketing strategy. Like free-to-play is a go-to-market strategy. It's not a business model. Microtransactions are a business model. So you don't sell free-to-play with microtransactions. Like nobody likes that. Okay, you're gonna nickel and dime me to death. Why would I like that? But free, just come, it's free. Like who can be against that? So people often think like free-to-play being a business model. It's not. It's a go-to-market strategy. And free is a go-to-market strategy. It's not applicable in every case. Velvet roping, gating, pre-committing, these are also good things. So it's good to kind of parse in your mind what are we really talking about. And like then when you talk about like something like NFTs and real ownership and then these kind of things, they sound like business primitives, all of them, and they are. People are not excited about business primitives. We are. We somehow need to charge for these things to return value to investors and pay employees to make awesome things. So we need to think about the business primitives, but we way too often go with our business brains and it's like, why don't you like, true ownership? Yeah, because it sounds to me like a scam. Like you've implemented a new kind of value capture mechanics. That's really what you're talking about. So the lesson is like free to play, it's a go-to-market strategy. Nobody is selling. Okay, it's really about microtransactions. Nobody likes that. But if you enter as free, and then it's like, I would like this knife over there. Looks cool. Let's buy the knife. But that's not what you're inviting people into. You're inviting people into an amazing game that is free. It's pretty powerful.
John, anything you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, there's something that every game maker that is trying to make games today knows, and that is users want it for free, and any attempt to get a dime out of people will be viewed by some segment of the gaming population as like, you're over monetizing this. Why are you possibly trying to make a dime on this? One of the things that's great about sort of the MMO space in games that try to use large populations as part of game mechanics, for example, like I think Eve's a great example of this. Players are content to each other in many of these kind of games, and so you have to have a value proposition where they feel like they're getting a great value for their time. Their time is the thing they care about the most. So you have to be willing to accept that some part of your user base is always going to be upset when you're trying to make money. But the idea of users making money on each other is a whole different animal, because now this pick your game item that you get, you're selling to somebody else. And as long as it doesn't give you a gameplay advantage, that's a pretty good feeling, because players like the idea of buying stuff other players make or buying things from other players. And I think like Steam Marketplace is a perfect example of this in a closed ecosystem, or in theory, closed ecosystem. But with Web3, it really greatly levels that playing field to where everything is above board because you can see it. You know, the chain makes everything visible. And I think that kind of knowledge, when you get a game that has a large user base, I think you're going to gradually see a lot of Web 2 players giving Web3 games a shot because of that. So, I don't know, to me, it's an awesome opportunity.
I wanted to ask each of you, and perhaps leaving aside the answer being just making a good game, but specifically, like, what do you guys see as like some of the primary obstacles to like us exploring the value of crypto around games and some of the things that it might unlock? And I guess without revealing what you guys are building too much, how are you guys approaching sort of solving that?
Okay, so I mean, I think both me and John, in a way, like come into this business on like the forefront of innovation. I mean, EverQuest really, I mean, you have Ultima, EverQuest is like a year later, EverQuest is like the first 3D experience. Like EverQuest really sets on a massive standard for what MMOs can be, and like you wouldn't believe how people are like yapping about their EverQuest stories today as we are like making games, everyone talking about moments from EverQuest and Ultima and Eve. And when you listen to those things, they're like design primitives that were very often organically invented. Most of the greatest moments when people are talking about their EverQuest life, it's about some emergent behavior where EverQuest was like a platform for that to emerge. And then we're capturing those little moments and we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we better ensure these things happen? So often when you have an innovation cycle, you have these unforeseen things where new things are invented because even if we're smart, we're not really that smart. We can hold the staple 5 abstractions in our brain to figure out, okay, what is the actual experience? It usually becomes an emergent thing of like in a new innovation cycle, what emerges as the thing that really becomes the thing. So now we're kind of fumbling in the dark, trying to find little nuggets of like, what are our design primitives? And you see little things pop up and they're kind of like, understanding all these little sort of verbs and nouns of design primitives that are being created and figuring out a way how to assemble them in a more stable structure so that the correct thing emerges. So we are in this very kind of painful phase where we don't really know what it is, and that's why we're trying to come up with these true ownership, like whatever, all the jargon we're making up. Because we just don't know what they are. VR went to a very similar phase. Like, okay, what is the movement mechanic? Everyone gets sick if you use an old movement mechanic. So we need to find new ways. Okay, what are the verbs of VR? And VR is still figuring it out because that is fundamentally transformative. It's very hard to make a really good VR game. It's very hard to make just any good innovation cycle game. So we are in this phase of just like, I know it's a cop-out to say, just make a great game, but it's also, okay, make a great game out of the design primitives that have yet not to be invented. So everyone has a hypothesis of like, what are the design primitives? But they are slowly going to emerge. Both EVE Online and EverQuest are examples of this. The best moments in EVE Online are user-invented. Same with EverQuest.
Yeah, I think there's many ways to approach this, and I was listening to some of the talks earlier, and this notion of purely on-chain games. Like, I'm fascinated by that as a user. As a game maker, my personal thought is that going with a game that's of a familiar type to players, making sure that they feel like, well, if they don't want to touch this Web3 piece, they don't have to. That it really is all about focusing on making a great game and making users feel that they're in a safe place to do that and that the Web3 players aren't necessarily getting a bigger advantage to anything. If we make that clear and we can make a game that everybody thinks is awesome and fun, we think we can bring them into the Web3 side. But there's definitely many obstacles. I think the biggest obstacles I still see are are just getting people to fund a crypto wallet. That's hard, right? Some of the people in this room are trying to solve that problem. It's still hard. Getting, like a lot of credit cards, at least in the United States, you can't buy crypto with them. These are hard things. And as game makers, when you see the regulatory environment, it might scare you off, when I don't think it should. Like, money finds a way of returning investment by making something that's so new that users are attracted to it despite the things they see as negatives. And I think Web3 right now is seen as a negative to many hardcore gamers. So don't focus on that. Focus on the great game, and also put the Web3 piece in there in a way that's non-threatening to the users. My opinion is that that's going to be the right approach for the kind of games that I like to make, and it's certainly sort of where I'm headed as a game maker.
Amazing. I think we're out of time here, but John, Hilmar, always a pleasure learning from you both.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.